Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to offer Dana, then please do go to justthiszen.org/giving. Your support really does make a huge difference. Thank you so much.
Hello. It's lovely to see you all. I'm just changing my view so that I'm not huge on my screen. Oh, I'm just taking you all in. It's a delight to see everyone. And I was just thinking what a privilege it is to sit amongst friends and to be able to sit in this seat for a little while and just to share with you a few things that have been moving through me, and hope they meet things that are moving through you in some way. And I'm I'm always amazed at this process of, it's a real privilege, to be able to sit here and to be able to offer. And it's a privilege to be in this practice. And part of me doesn't quite believe it. I don't quite believe that I'm here. How did I get here? What happened that I was the one right now sitting here? And each one of us is a teacher or a voice of the practice. And there's nothing really special about being here. And there's something very special about it. So it's both those things. And I think, and I was just thinking about all the wonderful talks that we've had. I always have this sense of, I don't know what it's like for you, but when I listen to pieces of music sometimes, there are bits of music that stay with you, aren't they? And you can kind of, some of them you really would like to get rid of sometimes because they're like a little thing that repeats in your mind. And I think sometimes when I listen to talks, it's like part of it is still playing inside me somewhere. It's not necessarily in words, but there's something that's still sort of moving through. And we've had so many rich offerings, and if you haven't listened to them all, I would say go and have a listen. I mean, Trudy gave two beautiful inquiry talks recently, A Word of Zen and Alive or Dead. A Word of Zen, I must admit, in her talk, she did rather sort of give me another name for it. Because she offered two koans, and that was the koan about, sort of, I'll kill the cat if you don't give me a word of Zen, and what Trudy said her grandmotherly side would say, just put down the fucking cat. So I think in my mind it's always going to be just put down the fucking cat talk, which is really yeah. Anyway, but I love that, and I love Duncan's choice of the talk that he offered from Kuhn, France, and you're holding it all. And we are, aren't we? We're holding it all of the time. Everything, our lives. And then Mary chose last week, Do Not Resuscitate by Katherine Thanas. So, and then of course, Josh's talks as well. And they all kind of move through me. And I don't know what it's like for you, but for me, I have a mind that doesn't naturally do lists, and I have to do a lot of distilling to sort of get a sense of, okay, what can I talk about? I could talk about so many things, and then somehow something begins to sort of settle a little and say, okay, let's just see what happens with, I've got 2 or 3 quotes here, and let's see what happens. There's a bit of me would like to just have absolutely nothing and just sit and talk to you. And just say, but there's also a bit of me that wants to still have a little hook somewhere. And it's enough really just to be here. And we all have a bit that thinks it's not enough, don't we? But it is enough. And I'm so grateful for all of you, for your practice and for just turning up. And one of the things that's been staying with me is the end of the poem that Josh shared by Norman McCaig, and the poem An Ordinary Day. And the last few words of it are, how ordinary, extraordinary things are, or how extraordinary, ordinary things are, like the nature of mind and the process of observing. And I was thinking that list could be very much longer than that. And I just wanted to, well, to think about that for myself. Ordinary and extraordinary. And I've been thinking about that. And then the other thing that I think I come with, and I'm going to really own this, is to say that my heart is broken. My heart is already broken. That brings tears. And I actually think all of our hearts are broken. And thank goodness we're here together with our broken hearts. But nothing special. They've been reading the Barry Magid book, Ending the Pursuit of Happiness. And one of the quotes, they usually send a quote at the beginnings of the, before we meet. And one of the quotes that they sent was, this is what Barry Magid says: we must come to allow ourselves to be the mortal and vulnerable and dependent beings that we are. We must see that our practice isn't going to enable us to overcome or transcend our nature, but allow us to be more and more open to the pain of being human. And there's something about knowing that my heart is broken. It feels as if my heart is also more open just to the pain of being human. And can I allow myself to actually meet what it means to be a human being? Katherine Thanas says, true intimacy occurs when we directly experience reality for ourselves. Zen practice is about the opening of the heart, which through practice opens itself. So as we sit here together and we practice together, maybe our hearts are just becoming more broken. I don't know. I wanted to share a day with you that I had recently, about 3 weeks ago. I went to see my younger son, who has 2 children. it was a grandma day. They don't call me grandma, they call me Moomin, but it was a Moomin day, and my husband gets called GDP, and we were there together, and we were, you know, having a great time. My grandson is 14, and he tried to involve me in some of the games that he played, and I'm up for having a go, but I'm pretty useless usually. And of course, he loves the fact that he wins until I get to know how to do it, and then it's a bit harder. And my granddaughter was busy practicing for a jazz dance show that she was doing. She's 10, so she's there, sort of showing me all her moves, and we were having a lovely day. It was an ordinary and extraordinary day, you know, just an ordinary and extraordinary day. And my heart is broken. My heart is broken. As Peter and I have been reading various different books, he has a very different um, palette, if you like to put it that way, of books to me. He's been reading all about Chairman Mao. Oh boy, it's about this thick, and oh, if my heart wasn't already broken, it would be more broken when he tells me some of the things, and the millions of people who died in the famines, and millions of people who were affected by the regime under Chairman Mao. And that's in our lifetimes. And we think that what's happening in the world now is new. And there's nothing that's new. It's not new. It's just more global. We're more aware of it. And then I've been reading a book. Isn't it interesting, the things that discover us? I've been reading a book called The Facemaker. And that's a book about a surgeon who was at the beginning of plastic surgery in the First World War. And it's both horrific and inspiring, what people will go at great lengths to do to help other people. And when you read these sort of things, you recognize how broken your heart is. If this has been part of humanity, this is heartbreaking. This is heartbreaking. And how can I accept my humanness when I read these things? Because it's not them and us, is it? It can't be them and us, it's us. This is part of who we are as human beings. And then I've been reading another book, which of course is inspirational, which is about Sister Chan Kong, who was the nun who helped Thich Nhat Hanh start Plum Village, and her life, and all of the things that she did that were amazing for the poor people, and how she lived through the Vietnam War, and how she kept her practice, and how she kept her spirit. And that's part of being human too. And one of the things that Bernie Glassman said was, he said that he didn't really do the work that he did, with people on the streets and human people, human beings who are in dire straits, I suppose you would say. I don't know how you would put it, really. He didn't really do this work to help them. He did it because he felt that moving in those parts of the world and society helped him to work with the parts of himself that he'd rejected. Pema Chodron continues with that. We read something on Wednesday from Pema Chodron in our Wednesday group. And she was reminding us that our practice begins with ourselves. And when we see the parts of ourselves that we hate and the parts of ourselves that we think are right or wrong or good or bad, then we reflect that out into the world and we see those in the world. And the question that she asks is, are we willing to see the full extent of our human nature? Are we willing to see the fullness of who we are as human beings? And my heart is broken. And it's still full. And going back to that day when I was sitting with Tom, his family, my son, and my granddaughter, and my lovely grandson, who was going to make pizza for us for tea, because that's one of his favorite things to do. And we got a phone call, and Jen came into the room. That's my daughter-in-law. And she just got a phone call from the ambulance. On this ordinary, extraordinary day, and my son had come off his bike and was in the ambulance and had smashed the side of his face. How curious that I'd been reading books about how people put back the face of those soldiers who had been in the war. How curious life is, the way it offers us these things. So on this ordinary, extraordinary day, suddenly everything shifted and changed. And it just reminds us of how life is like that all the time. All the time, it can be ordinary and extraordinary. And it can break our hearts. And just to say that my son is okay, he's had to have some manipulation of his cheekbone and stuff. And he's all right. And he was concussed for a little while. But everything shifted in just one moment. Everything shifted. And you can imagine, the whole process. We suddenly everything changed. We were suddenly helping Jen to go to the hospital, looking after the grandchildren while, and sorting everything out there. And thank goodness we were there, and sometimes life offers that, doesn't it? That opportunity to be part of something. And, my heart is already broken, and it's breaking all the time. All the time, every day, it's breaking. And I'm glad that it's breaking, because it means that feeling the world and meeting the rawness of what it is to be a human being is real to me. And then I'll tell you just one other little ordinary day. I went out the other day and I was walking to the shop, as you do. And I'm just walking along this road, and there's a young man there, and he's walking fairly earnestly with a pram. And I was kind of in the way. He was walking the same way as me, and I was kind of walking slowly and a little in the way. And I stepped on to one side and said, you can walk quicker than I can. Do you want to go past me? And he was doing that, and I said, can I see who's in the pram? As I do. And he said, oh yes, he said, and he lifted up the hood, whatever it is, the cover, and there was this tiny, tiny baby. Oh my goodness. And I said, how old is she? or how old, that's what I said. I didn't say she. And he said, a week, a week old, this tiny scrap of humanity. Oh, and that was the moment when that recognition of why my heart is broken and why my heart can feel open to things was there. I felt such love and compassion for this little scrap of humanity just come into the world. And he said, there's this little old lady here. She's pretty harmless. I can tell her something. And he said, they said, yes. He said, she's called Edie, he said. And I said, what a lovely name. And I just said to Edie, I hope all goes well, Edie. And it was an ordinary, extraordinary moment. Extraordinary. Aren't we amazing? And I think every one of us has been that little tiny scrap of humanity, completely defenseless, completely dependent upon everybody else, completely vulnerable. And I think it's so important for me, for us to have that compassion for ourselves, for that little scrap, for my son who hurt himself, for each other, for all those parts of ourselves that we see in the world behaving in ways that it's really hard to accept. But it's all us. There isn't anybody else. It's all us. And I just wanted to finish with a story that when I first read it, I fell in love with it. And I guess, well, you can decide for yourselves what it's about. I think it's from this book by Joan Sutherland, Through Forests of Every Colour. I don't know whether you know it. She's such a beautiful, beautiful writer. I'm going to put my glasses on. That looks good, doesn't it? I've long carried a story about a wedding kimono, tucked under my robes next to my skin. A traditional Japanese countrywoman named Nanjo Sawako began sewing such a kimono for her daughter, Nayako, when she was a little girl, as was the custom. But Nanjo Nayako didn't grow up to get married and settle down in the small village. She became an international photojournalist. She died covering the Afghan war of the 1980s. A mother who said she just hoped for a normal, common life for her daughter, who had never left the village herself before, heard a call and responded, adding a moment of extraordinary grace to the story of the world. She made the dangerous journey to the front lines in Afghanistan, carrying the kimono. She found her daughter's grave, marked with a simple wooden stake, and wrapped her body in the kimono. A mother blesses her daughter's life, even if it isn't the life she would have chosen for her. Isn't even a life she entirely understands, but it was her daughter's, and she gives it her blessing. She doesn't turn her love away from what is painful. Isn't this the ceremony that reveals the home in any moment? And I'd add the ordinary in the extraordinary, and the extraordinary in the ordinary. Even if this is not always the life I would have chosen for myself, even if I don't understand why some things have happened the way that they have, it's mine and I bless it. I bless this life that has been given into my care. It is home. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your teaching, Lynne. And of course you're there.